If you follow environmental news closely, you've probably heard about the term PFAS, which is a family of chemicals that are used in all kinds of products and have recently been found to potentially cause serious health problems. What you might not know is that PFAS are found in the majority of breathable, waterproof gear that we use for hunting, fishing, hiking, and, well, everything else. In the not-so-distant future, state legislation is coming that will restrict the use of PFAS in a lot of the outdoor gear we use. In other words, most of the rain gear that you're used to is about to change, and for very good reason. I'm Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson, and today on the podcast, I'm talking to staff writer Laura Lancaster. She has been testing rain gear and interviewing folks about PFAS for the last several months. Laura is going to help us understand what PFAS chemicals are, the potential problems around them, and what the future of waterproof outdoor gear just might hold. Okay, Laura, before I start asking you questions about PFAS, I have to tell you something. One of my worst subjects in high school was chemistry. It's very hard for me to understand. So as you get into this, just, keep that in mind. You might have to slow it down for me a little bit, make it easy for me to understand.
Alex, I need you to know that you're in good company. It's also one of my worst subjects in high school.
Okay, great. So two people who are very bad at chemistry talking about chemistry.
We're here together.
Perfect. We'll educate all of the Outdoor Life listeners just the way they need to be. So to get us started, can you explain what PFAS are? What are these chemicals and where are they found?
So PFAS is a group of chemicals, of synthetic chemicals, and what makes them a group is that they all have carbon and fluorine atoms that are bonded together. So as you can imagine, that's a really broad definition, and there's about 15,000 different chemicals that are in this PFAS family.
Okay. And why do we care about them? What are they used in? What are PFAS chemicals used in?
So these chemicals are really everywhere in the modern world, including in outdoor products. They're in nonstick cookware. They're in stain-resistant fabrics, in couches, in your carpets. It's in makeup, water-resistant makeup. It's in dental floss. It's in toilet paper. It's in takeout containers. Anywhere where people are trying to add a veneer of stain protection, water resistance, or durability, PFAS could potentially have been added.
Okay. We'll get to, of course, our angle into this is the outdoor gear, but I think we got to do some explaining before we get to that part. So before we go there, talk to me about why PFAS chemicals are problematic.
So the first thing to know about PFAS chemicals is that the bonds between the carbon and the fluorine are incredibly strong. So that means that these don't break down as easily as other materials do. In fact, they really don't break down at all. We're talking hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the chemicals are building up in the environment for time. And that means that if they end up in our water source, they're going to stick around in our water source. If they end up in our bodies, they're going to stick around in our bodies. There have been some long-term studies done on some well-known if you're a chemist, I suppose, PFOS versus PFAS. And they've been associated with a range of cancers from kidney, thyroid, testicular cancer, pregnancy complications, reproductive complications, developmental issues in children. And again, the higher the exposure, the more risk there is.
Gotcha. And the science at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but the science at this point is pretty clear that a buildup of these chemicals is not safe, not good for human health.
Yeah, I think because there are 15,000 different chemicals in the PFAS family, it's sort of hard to say definitively that every single chemical is carrying the same amount of risk. But it's a situation where the more studies are done on these chemicals, worse the news is getting. And they're in everything, and they're building up in the environment and staying put over time. And so that's where states have decided that we have to take action to prevent this exposure from occurring. And we should say briefly that if you have a couch that has a PFAS coating, this is not worry about your couch. Studies have shown that it's probably not permeating the skin. It's more of an issue of ingestion when you breathe it in, when you drink it in, when you eat something that contains PFAS.
Yeah. Okay. This is a really important point because I think, you hear that these chemicals are in everything and you're like, oh no, my rain jacket is poisoning me.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works, right?
Well, probably not. Don't lick your rain jacket. If your rain jacket has like a PFAS coating on it, like it could get into your body that way. Should we talk briefly about how these chemicals are getting into people's bodies?
Yeah. How are they getting into our bodies? Yeah.
Okay. So the way that we know the most about these chemicals is from the exposure of the people who work in factories that produce this chemical, who have lived in like the environment around where these chemicals have been produced. And so if you are breathing an air that contains PFAS, that's like a huge health risk. But most people are not living near factories that produce this chemical. So how else can this get into your body? A major source of contamination at present is through the water supply. PFAS is showing up in water supplies across the country. And there's a few reasons this is happening. One reason is that PFAS has been in gear for so long, in outdoor goods, in indoor goods for so long, for decades and decades, that it's in the landfills now, and it's leaching out of the landfills. The rain is falling, and then down into the groundwater, into the water supply. Another way that this chemical has been getting into the groundwater supply is the result of this firefighting foam called AFFF. This was a really, really effective firefighting foam. And in places where it was used both for fighting fires and for training for firefighting, and it leached into the groundwater supply, it's severely contaminated with like municipal water supplies and like well water supplies. And that's like a real reason why people are seeing PFAS appear in more different places around the country, is because of like the use of this firefighting foam, which has been banned mostly. Most places have now banned this firefighting foam, but it is still being used in some places too. A third risk, which is a little bit less applicable to this podcast, but we should just say it, is ingestion of PFAS. And that's most likely happening as a result of takeout containers that have PFAS linings on them. And then you have your hot food on this lining and it gets absorbed into the food. So they found that people who eat more takeout tend to have higher levels of PFAS in their bodies than people who do not eat takeout. Again, water supply is probably the biggest one for most people.
Okay. That's all really good background information. I think maybe the most obvious segue that gets us into the outdoor gear space, which is where we live at Outdoor Life, is the situation with Gore, which is the company that creates Goretex, which is used in so many products that we use as hunters and hikers and campers and everything else. So can you explain what's going on there?
Yeah, so let's back up just a little bit to say that both California, a lot of states have passed legislation around PFAS, but the ones that are affecting the outdoor industry specifically is legislation that's been passed by California and New York that's going to ban intentionally added PFAS added to textiles in California and apparel in New York starting in 2025, with one exception we will come back to, for severe wet weather. So this means that you cannot have any waterproof membranes, cannot have any DWR, durable water resistant finishes, with intentionally added PFAS on your rain jackets and sell them in those states by that deadline. So gear manufacturers are, for the most part, trying to adapt their existing gear lines to meet this new law.
Run that by me one more time. So 2025 for California?
January 1st, 2025. Yes, this is coming soon.
Yeah. And this is important because California is like a major market. Like, it's
a big state.
It's a big state with a ton of people in it. And,
New York's not too small either.
And exactly. And New York is not too small either. So, if you want to be, effectively selling outdoor gear, in America, it's pretty hard to just like, okay, we just won't operate in New York or California. That's probably not tenable for most general outdoor gear companies.
No, most outdoor gear companies are going to want to have a substantial portion, if not all of their apparel and textiles be available for sale in those two places. But for a lot of companies, that means they have to go back and sort of re-engineer, rejigger everything that they're making to ensure that they're using membranes and finishes and all of the other component parts that adhere to this guideline. And so the reason, go back to what we were talking about, the reason this affects Goretex specifically is that currently Goretex only has one membrane that is PFAS free. The rest of their line would be covered under this ban of PFAS. There's some potential room for disagreement about the definition of PTFE, but it is a carbon and fluorine bond, so it should fall under that category as well.
Okay. So there's a bunch of different things going on here. One thing that's important to explain is like, it is just 2 states at the moment. So like, me living in Minnesota, I theoretically will still be able to like buy Goretex jacket as it had existed previously next year, right? Do you think those will still be like out and available like in the market?
I mean, I think that's a really good question. It's probably going to vary company to company. I think it's probably not sustainable to have same jacket with 2 different technologies engineered into it for sale in different markets for many of them. When I've queried companies about this, I have not heard anyone come back to me with, we are going to create a product line specifically for California. Everyone has come back to me and said, we are re-engineering this jacket for this season. This jacket already is PFAS free. This jacket will be PFAS free by this deadline. So I think that we can expect to see PFAS eliminated from most outdoor gear over the coming year.
And it's also true that it's New York and California now, but it's probably likely that other states will join this effort.
Well, I hope so. It certainly seems like a big issue. I mean, people who care about the outdoors, which includes everyone who's buying outdoor gear, doesn't want to see their environment polluted by chemicals being produced to give us gear. So I would like to see this chemical taken out everywhere. So
yeah. Why is it used in so much gear, especially rain gear right now? Like, what are the benefits of using it just from like a performance standpoint? What does it do?
It's both its water resistance and the stain resistance, and also like the longevity of how long it can last. It can go through the wash many more times and still maintain that water resistance compared to, at least so far my understanding is, compared to options that don't use PFAS in them. So I think that a new rain jacket out of the box will protect you in a rainstorm to the same extent that everyone has been used to. But if you've gone 4 months and you haven't retreated it or you haven't washed it, maybe that's when the quality is going to start to be more noticeable. So I think in terms of how will your gear change, I'm expecting the biggest difference to be in how much care your gear is going to need to keep performing at that same level as it did previously, but not necessarily for there to be instances where people are in danger or something like that as a result of not having that same sort of rain protection as they did before.
Yeah, rain gear care. Talk to me about this more, because this is something I don't do. I just have a bunch of rain jackets, and when I'm done wearing them, I throw them in the closet, and when they start leaking, then I just get a new one. So what should I actually be doing?
I think this change in legislation is going to prompt us on the gear team to start doing a little bit more coverage on, like, as the chemical makeup of these jacket changes and we need to do more care, like, here's how to actually take care of your gear. Yeah, no, you should be washing your rain jacket. I think that they suggest like once a season at the minimum as a way to help keep its water protection up. And then if you're noticing that that DWR finish on the surface, which is separate from the membrane, but if the water is penetrating that surface material, you can sort of re-up that DWR protection by putting it through the wash with sort of a technical wash that will re-up, get back into the fabric.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's not like a doomsday for rain gear, right? Like, we're still going to have like good usable rain gear. We might just have to put more effort into treating it. My other question is, are there good non-PFAS products out there right now that we know about? And have you used any of them?
I have not used any of the PFAS-free products specifically. They do exist. Fjallraven is one company that's been really out there at the forefront, working on creating apparel that is PFAS-free. Cotopaxi has a rain jacket that is PFAS-free. The Beta series from Arc'teryx was re-engineered to be free from PFAS. So those are just some examples of options that are out there for people. And there is you can buy a technical wash now for your gear if you're looking to re-up the DWR and you want to make sure you're not using something that has PFAS in it. Nikwax has their whole line of down washes and waterproofing washes for all manner of gear, PFAS free. So.
Okay. So explain what that is a little bit more. Is it just like a vial that you like pour in the wash with your rain jacket and wash it? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, it's like a liquid and you put it into the wash. Have you ever used a down wash before?
Nope.
Okay. All right. We got to do a story on this. Yeah. No, if you're ever like, I need to wash my down jacket and I want to make sure that I'm not like harming the down, there's like specific detergents that you can use. And so it's just sort of like a detergent that you would use in place of like soap to wash your jacket, and it will re-impregnate the fabric with DWR.
Gotcha. And non-PFAS manner.
Yes. Nikwax can set you up with a non-PFAS one. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is, I mean, that's also important too, because like anything that you're putting into your washing machine, that's going right into the wastewater for your city, and that's going to go right into streams that the wastewater treatment plant dumps into. And wastewater treatment plants are not taking PFAS out of the water. So it's part of the work that they do.
We'll be right back after the break.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Williamsburg. In Williamsburg, Virginia, there's never too much of a good thing. Whether you're a foodie, a golfer, a history buff, a shopaholic, an outdoor enthusiast, or a thrill seeker, you'll find what you came for here and more. So ask yourself, what is it you want? Discover Williamsburg and plan your trip at visitwilliamsburg.com.
Let's go back. You said there was going to be an exception to this legislation that's coming. What's the exception?
Yeah, so there's an exception in the California New York legislation that is for 3 years. It counts for severe wet weather. And they provide some examples in the legislation of what is typical outdoor gear use and what is severe wet weather use. So typical outdoor gear use would be camping, skiing, fishing, hiking. Severe wet weather use would include open water fishing, open water sailing, whitewater kayaking, and mountaineering. I'm sure that to the people who wrote this legislation, that felt very specific. Of course, to everyone in the outdoor industry, we have a lot of questions. I think specifically backpackers and backpack hunters, people who, especially if you're going out for an extended period of time, would like to know if the conditions they are used to encountering would count as severe wet weather. The answer to that is that we don't know. But there are some companies, when queried, both Stone Glacier and Q believes that some of their products will fall under this severe wet weather temporary exception. So
yeah,
that's something to be aware of.
Gotcha. Do you think over time it's possible that, now kind of forced, like these companies are being forced to, engineer gear that will be like PFAS free? Do you think it's just like a matter of time till we get the same sort of performance with non-PFAS gear as we had with PFAS gear? Like, or are we just going to kind of have to live with, more fragile gear for a few years?
I don't know, because PFAS has been in everything for so long. It's sort of hard to separate out, even for someone who's been reviewing gear, like when we're experiencing performance, technical ability. Is that the PFAS, or is that something else to do with the way the gear is designed? So I think it's going to take a few years to sort all that out. But I don't think that any of us are sitting around bemoaning the loss of BPA in our water bottles or wishing that we were still using DDT to fight off mosquitoes. So I think that this is something that people will eventually used to, and that it will not feel like a loss. It will feel like a gain to have clean water and clean air. So
this is going to be a really interesting time to be testing rain gear, which is something you've been doing for a couple of years now. So do you have like an idea of how you're going to like approach the PFAS versus non-PFAS rain gear tests? Like what do you have? What are you thinking about? What are you cooking up?
We're always curious to find out like how is gear actually performing. And it's interesting to like have this moment in time where we're talking about like such a big change in the industry. So the plan right now is to take rain jacket that is using PFAS in both the membrane and the DWR, and to compare it to a rain jacket that is not using PFAS anywhere, including in the membrane and the DWR. And we're going to subject it to the same exact conditions. So that's including like getting rained on and sun exposure, just exposure to the elements in general, putting it through the wash, even though Alex never does that, 4 or 5 or
Not
6
yet.
times. And then
Not yet.
But yeah, we're going to wash our gear and then retesting the gear to see what is that real difference in performance. Because I think that there will be a lot of people who know that they're at that kind of extreme level where they really do need the best protection. But there are a lot of people who are like, I probably don't need a rain jacket that can see me through a monsoon. I really just need something for like some afternoon squalls while I'm hiking. And do those people need to worry about the performance differences between these two jackets? So that's kind of the question that we want to answer.
Yeah, you're definitely onto something. Like there is a difference in requirements for what different people need out of rain gear. You know, like in some cases, if you don't have the right rain gear, you could die. In other cases, if you don't have the right rain gear, you might just be a little uncomfortable for a little while. So like there is that distinction. One thing I'm curious about, does just the traditional like good old rubber rain gear, does that have PFAS in it too? Because
PFAS has been around for so long and is in so many different kinds of products for so many different kinds of reasons, I don't think that you could know that unless you query the manufacturer, which I have not yet done. So, yeah. But I would be curious to find out if it's PFAS is in there or if they've been PFAS free this whole time.
Yeah. How do we even know if one, right now it seems like you can kind of assume that all rain jackets have PFAS in them, or all breathable rain jackets have PFAS in them. But going forward, like when this becomes more of an issue, how are we going to know if one jacket does versus another?
I believe there's a labeling requirement too in the California law. So that should provide people with information about whether or not their gear has PFAS in it or not. I think that we can expect to see a lot more information about what does and does not have PFAS in it, especially as it pertains to apparel and textiles and consumables going forward. So I don't know if your couch is going to get a PFAS label, but a lot of other items should. So
yeah, you see it kind of as like the BPA. You mentioned BPA before, like the BPA free. Like that's kind of like a positive marketing point now. You think that's basically going to happen with PFAS too?
Yeah, I think we're definitely already on the road to seeing that happen. There are already brands that will advertise themselves as being PFAS free. I think that there just isn't the concern awareness as to why that's something that you should care about, which is like why this legislation is important and why I'm glad that we're doing this podcast to spread some awareness about what people's concerns are.
Yeah. In the big world of rain gear and, like all this outdoor gear and also like the inclusion of PFAS in that, what do you think like the main takeaways should be for people listening to this and just like the general consumer? Like what are some things that like tangible things that they can do to one, just like kind of better protect themselves against these chemicals that we now know are bad, and two, just kind of be, on the helpful side of this change to make sure that, whatever products they're interested in aren't contributing to the problem.
Yeah. On the health level for an individual and for their family, I think one of the most important things you can do is find out what testing has been done on your local water supply. So current recommendation from the EPA, this isn't a requirement. The current recommendation from the EPA is to have no more than 4 parts per trillion of the two biggest kinds of PFAS, PFOA and PFAS in water. So in some water supplies, the levels are a little bit higher than that. And in some water supplies, because of that contamination from firefighting foam and other manufacturing outputs that we talked about, they can be exceedingly high, sort of off the charts high. And if you live in a place where that's true, like you want to know and you want to take action to make sure that you're not drinking water like that. If you're really concerned about it, I think it's probably also worth taking a look at reducing the amount of takeout that you're eating, just to keep the amount of like contamination in your food lower.
Probably not bad from just like a general health standpoint anyways.
Yeah, eat less takeout. So, I don't know, I have a kid. I find myself eating a lot of pizza in cardboard boxes, and now I'm having to think about. And then from the perspective of like, how can we be on the right side of this to help make sure that there is less sort of PFAS in the environment? I mean, I think it's definitely, of course, like worth looking at items that you purchased to see if you can find an option that is PFAS free. But I think that realistically, there isn't enough labeling being done to give people the information to make those kinds of choices. I think this is going to happen sort of at the legislature level. So if you live in a place where there is talk of like having a ban on sort of intentionally added PFAS to whatever product is the product that your community is concerned about, I think supporting that legislation will go a long way towards helping to eliminate this toxin from our environment.
Yeah, and this is really my last question for you. But to kind of put a fine point on how this really is a problem, there's currently a lawsuit going on with Gore right now, right? Where they're
I mean, there's a long string of lawsuits around companies that have been creating PFAS, the chemical, and then the communities around those companies suffering as a result. So DuPont, who originally created PFAS, has had a number of lawsuits. And so now Goretex facing a lawsuit as a result of contamination to the community near their Cherry Hill plant is ongoing.
Yeah. So it's not just something that, like there are real like tangible issues and real tangible health concerns that have resulted in important large-scale lawsuits. So this isn't something that's just like all these greenies are just like complaining about this chemical that isn't really a big deal. This actually is a big deal.
Yeah. The firefighters that were exposed inhaling the AAF chemical the AFFF chemical that is polluting the groundwater. There's also lawsuits around that too, as a result of like major health issues that have come out of that. So
yeah.
And again, this chemical does not break down in the environment. So it's not like it got into the groundwater and then it'll flush out and then everything will be fine. It's building up over time. So the more that we can do to eliminate now, the less buildup there will be later. But to a certain extent, some of the buildup that exists now we're kind of stuck with, and we don't want this problem to get worse.
So my takeaways from this are: 1, don't lick my rain jacket. 2, see about the potential contamination of PFAS in my own water supply where I live. And then 3, to keep an eye out for PFAS-free gear next year, because that's when we're going to start seeing more of it.
Yeah, it's around now, but I think that starting in the fall, there's a bunch of manufacturers that will be releasing PFAS-free gear in light of the upcoming deadline for January 1.
Okay.
And then we'll find out what is severe wet weather on January 1st.
Maybe, probably not. We'll probably never know. But it will be interesting to see how your tests play out. I'll be really curious about 1, the performance differences, and 2, just like if there is some super secret way to start treating our rain gear that will make it last longer even without PFAS.
Yeah, maybe we'll get you some technical wash to help re-up the waterproofing.
That's probably good.
Jackets in your closet.
That'd probably be a good start. Okay.
The Outdoor Life podcast is edited by Mike Pedersen of 85 Audio. It's hosted by our editor-in-chief, Alex Robinson, and it's produced by me, executive editor Natalie Krebs. Reporting in this episode is by staff writer Laura Lancaster. You can read Laura's full story at outdoorlife.com/PFAS. That's outdoorlife.com/PFAS. Music in this episode is composed and performed by Pierre Locatelli via APM Music.